Thank you, Spencer. Let me look around for a minute and kind of get my bearings, see what's going on. I woke up this morning. I had known about this since about June. I actually had the opportunity. I could have took June, but I thought it was too soon, so I said I'll do September. And I didn't really give it a thought. Everything was fine. Everything was good until this morning. This morning I woke up full of fear, full of anxiety. The thoughts that were in my head on October 9th, 2021, that told me I was a worthless human being and nobody wanted to hear from me. They were there this morning. And I had told Spencer that I probably wasn't going to the morning meeting at 9 o'clock. And I went to that meeting and just vomited on these people about how I was feeling. Because I knew I was safe. You know, I stressed over this pretty much all day until about 5. My wife's probably going to kill me, but let me tell you what happened at 5 o'clock. My youngest daughter and her husband and their 2-year-old daughter live with us in the basement. I went in to take a shower, full glass doors, clear. Thought the door was shut, and I turn around, and there's my 2-year-old granddaughter staring right at me. I have never seen such a disgusted look on a girl's face my entire life to see me naked. I instantly stopped thinking about this talk. It's funny how our higher power works, you know? Anyway, she was devastated. So was I. I don't come to this meeting. I still have kind of a hard time leaving the house at night. You know, I have that hibernating syndrome a little bit, you know, and I get to the meetings I need to get to, but I don't come to this meeting. But I listen to every talk that's recorded is on YouTube under Utah Valley Alano Club. A couple days later, you can listen to them. You know, and I listen to them at work with earphones in. You know, I would chuckle because every so often you would see some that said NSFW. And I would be like, okay, not safe for work. Well, I'm the only male with 9 females. And they range from 63 to about 38. I can't imagine listening to one of you guys talk out loud, without speakers, without earphones at work. Have you heard some of your stories? So I just listen to them at work, and I'm telling you this, every Tuesday or Wednesday at work, listening to these talks has really been enjoyable. They really have. They have helped me tremendously. I'm grateful they're there. I am grateful for technology. For some reason, I can't find Charlie's. I've looked. You know, this is what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on what happened and what it's like. You know, I was raised in a beautiful family. My parents are still together. My father has passed away. I had a beautiful childhood. My dad, we hunted, we fished. I never wanted for anything. I had everything I needed. But I had this nervous disposition. I can remember at a very young age, my father would wake us up to go fishing or hunting, and I would get such anxiety that I would make myself sick over what was going to happen, what we were going to do. I knew that there was something different because I was always on edge from a very, very young age. My father was an alcoholic. My father and I were baptized into the LDS church on the same day. He was 33 and I was 8. He quit drinking like that. And now that I look at that, my father replaced it with a spiritual program of his understanding, and he dove headfirst into it. And he got into service. And he never drank again. But to me, my life changed a little bit. You know, we would drink with Dad. We would go with the boys, and they would play poker and be drunk. You know, my life just changed a little bit. And I got introduced to Heavenly Father and Jesus. And instantly, I was filled with fear that I never would measure up. And at a very young age, I was trying to replace that with something. I remember at the age of, I think it was 9, we lived above a Skaggs, it was called. It was a little department store. And I would go down there, and this was back in the day where the Smokes and the Copenhagen and Skoal and everything was out front. They weren't behind the counter. I would go down there and I would steal 5 or 6 cans of snuff, Copenhagen, Happy Days, Skoal, whatever I could get my hands on. And I had a coffee can, and I took that coffee can and buried it about a mile away from my house. And I would go over there and escape. I would escape with nicotine. It was probably about 13. I would go down to that same department store, and I would steal nudie magazines. And I found myself escaping through that. All this time, I'd never taken a drink, I'd never used a drug, but I would escape the feeling that was going on inside me with those things. You know, and I look back on that and I just think, what was I trying to replace? And this whole time I was fearful. I would go to church with my family, and the things I would hear, I was already doomed. I was doomed. I was going to hell. And I couldn't escape that feeling. Well, then a few years went by and I turned 16 and I got drunk for the first time. And that was something that I'd never felt before. And I didn't look back after that. After that, God didn't matter. My family didn't matter. My parents kicked me out of the house at age 17, and I was on my own. And to me, that was hallelujah. I don't got to do what you tell me to do. And number one, I don't got to go to church. Because every time I went to church, I felt guilty and ashamed and knew that I was a loser. And I didn't know how to deal with it. You know, the first time that my sobriety date is August 10th of 2021. So I recently just got a 4-year chip. The first time that I went to treatment, I believe was in 1980, 86 or 87, somewhere around there. And the reason I went to treatment, and this is what I would tell people, and I was strung out on cocaine. I was physically strung out on cocaine. I never once recognized the alcohol problem that I had. I had to get off the cocaine. By then, my family was talking to me again. They were actually helping me get into treatment. And instantly, the loving family that I have knew that if I went back to church and I started living right, that everything would be okay. And it was for a time. You know, my life is these cycles of detox treatment center, 2 or 3 years of sobriety, building my life back up, only to burn it down again. And in those 2 to 3 years, I never once got a sponsor. I didn't go to meetings because I knew I could do it on my own. And during this time, I would continue to go to church. And I want to preface this. I have nothing against religion. Nothing. If it works for you, it's beautiful. I don't have anything against religion. You know, I went to treatment 3 other times with this cycle. You know, I remember one time I found meth, and that was the next great thing in my life, and I proceeded to burn my life to the ground. I was so delusional that my wife said to me, "Hey, I'm going to the grocery store. Is there anything I can get for you?" And I remember it like it was yesterday. I said, "Yeah, will you grab another case of beer?" 7 o'clock came, 8 o'clock came, 9 o'clock came, 10 o'clock came, and my wife never came back. I proceeded to do what I do for the next couple days, running and gunning. Didn't give a second thought that she had my youngest daughter. She was gone. I didn't notice for the entire week before that she was putting her orders together. She was packing the car. She was planning where she was going. I had no clue. You know, I had checked myself. I was so delusional. I'd been up for many a days, and I was driving a company car with about no sleep for 4 days or so, and I started hallucinating driving this car. I was hallucinating that the people behind me were following me, knew what I was doing, and it was so clear to me that I thought they were herding me to the recovery center. It's no joke. I really did. I was sitting in my vehicle outside the treatment center, and I called my boss, and I told him where I was. And he asked me a couple questions. Are you there now? I said, yeah. Have you gone in yet? I said, no, I'll be going in. He said, okay, you go on in, but leave the keys, and we'll send somebody to get the vehicle. You just go get better. I was hallucinating so bad that I thought my family and everybody was inside the recovery center were going to be so happy that I was there and clapping and so proud of me. And I went in and they shut the door, and it was just another time. By the company that I worked for insured themselves. By the time I got in there, they had canceled my insurance. You know, this is my life. My wife was gone. Here I am again. That was the fourth time I went to treatment. And every time I went to treatment, it was either cocaine, opiates, meth. I never thought I had an alcohol problem. But what's funny is I never did drugs until I did alcohol. I couldn't see that, you know? I'm an idiot. So that my life went like that for several years. I remember no, that wasn't the second to the last. I went to treatment again. It was the recovery Renaissance Ranch. I thought, I'll try the LDS program. That'll do it. So I went to Renaissance Ranch when it was up in Park City, and I made it there 2 weeks because I got kicked out because I was sneaking and using the phone. It was their fault. Jana, will you come get me? They just kicked me out for using the phone. Can you believe it? So I'm going to kind of jump ahead to just before I went into treatment on August 9th of 2021. My wife, I was sober at the time, white knuckling it and rebuilding my life. I got my wife back. I got my house back. I just bought a new home. I was going to church. I had service commitments in church weekly. Jana and I were married in the temple. I think it was 2013, we decided as a couple that we would do date night. And I remember it was date night, and I did not want to go. I thought it was stupid. I didn't want to go. So we were going to go to dinner and to a movie. And I got a resentment towards her, a resentment towards what we as a couple had decided to do. Why would you do that? And from Salem to Orem, we were going to go to Outback. From Salem to Orem, I had talked her into, let's have a couple drinks. It'll be okay. You know, bless her heart, you know, she says, you sure? Are you sure? You know, I'm like, yeah, I'm sure. You know, I won't be taking pills. We'll just have a couple drinks with dinner. That night is what started an 8-year relapse because of a resentment, and I didn't want to go. It interrupted my time watching TV, sitting on the couch, doing absolutely nothing. And the drinking was fun for a while. I was a functioning alcoholic. I could go to work every day. I could fulfill my duties as a husband and a father, and still drink every day. It wasn't until 2020 or 2021, I believe, probably, I want to say February, something like that, that I noticed that I had to drink or I was sick. But I also had to go to work. So me being me, I found a source for opiates, and I would use all morning, and then from 2 o'clock on, I knew I had to drink, and I would drink. And when I say drink, I didn't drink socially. I didn't drink with something next to me watching TV. When I drank, it was go to the pantry, grab the gallon of vodka, and have 3 shots and put it away. And 15 minutes later, do the same thing. 15 minutes later, do the same thing. It got to the point where my back door coming in from the garage is probably about as close as that door to the pantry. And before I did anything, I'd hit that garage door and I'd hit that pantry and I'd have 3 shots and I'd throw up. And I would have 2 more, and then I could go see my wife. It was that way every single day. Saturdays, I remember Jana would say, you know, you really shouldn't drink in the morning. You know, I had to drink in the morning because Jana could tell when I was on opiates. And so the weekends were kind of miserable. So I had to drink. Because I knew she could tell. So I'm living this lie. I'm in the pantry by 8 a.m., 9 a.m., and this went on for about 6 months. But the last 3 or 4 months, every night about 6 o'clock, I would start fantasizing about how I'm going to kill myself. And I had certain plans. I would have a plan to where I think she can get some insurance money. I would have a plan to where somebody maybe wouldn't find me. This was every night. But the next morning I would wake up and I would forget all about that because I had to drink, or I was sick, physically sick. And by this time, I am so spiritually sick and physically sick. And by this time, my family didn't say a word to me. This is how he is. My children, if I called them after noon or so, maybe, afternoon, none of them would answer. If I called them in the morning, maybe they'd pick up. They didn't come to the house. If they did come to the house, the only thing Jana would say to me is, please don't embarrass me. And so on August 9th, I went home, and I have absolutely no idea why to this day. I was at my jumping off place. I was too scared and too chicken shit to kill myself, even though I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know, and everything that I tried before never worked. And I just knew that, my kids were raised. They were all doing great. And I'm done fighting this disease. I'm done. I didn't want to do it anymore. And so for some reason on August 9th, I went home and I just said, Jana, I need to go to treatment. I didn't know what that looked like. And all she said is okay. And I knew a guy in the program, and I called him. And by 8 o'clock that night, I was at Steps. But what was crazy is about that is they put me in detox, pumped me full of medication for the opiates and for the alcohol and whatever they give you. And I was so sick. And after 5 days, they put me in general population there, And it was all men. And man, life came to a screeching halt. It was probably after about the eighth or ninth day that I could tell all of the medication that they had given me was gone. It was out of my system. It was just me. And I went crazy. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to talk to you. I didn't want to be with you. I didn't want to hear what you had to say. I stayed in my room. I stayed in my room so long that the other members of the recovery center were complaining to the counselors that he needs to be out here. I would come out to eat and go back in my room. I called Jana a couple times, and finally I called her like the third time, and I said, I don't want to be here, man. I want to come home. And all she said to me was, Curtis, I don't care. You can leave. If you don't want to do this, you can leave. But you're not coming home. I actually think she said, quit calling and threatening me. That's what she said. Quit calling me and threatening me that you're going to leave. If you want to leave, leave. But you're not coming home. It was another couple days, and I knew that I had to do something. And at this time, I knew God hated me. I knew there was no way I could be forgiven for all the stuff that I've done. But for some reason, on that day, I just gave it one more try. And I went into my room, and I shut the door, and I just landed on my knees, and all I said was, please help me want to be here. Just help me want to be here. That's all I said. And for some reason, something changed. A long story short, I was there for another 20 days or 18 days, and I knew that what I do when I get out of treatment is I go right back to work, because that's what men do, and I take care of my family. But I knew that never worked. And so for some reason, because I had actually told a few people that I wasn't going to do aftercare. And I had gotten laid off while I was in there. And it was for the first time, I can't remember if I ever collected unemployment or not. For some reason, they laid me off while I was in there. And I could get unemployment. And they talked me into going to aftercare instead of going back to work. So I went to aftercare. I knew that everything I had done everything I've done after treatment, every time was my will. And this time, I just thought I would try something different. So I went to my first meeting, which was in Mapleton. It was a men's meeting, and I was scared to death. I was nervous. I didn't want to be there. But I knew there was no other chance, because I, before, would never go to meetings, and so I went. My first service commitment was at that building, and they made me the door greeter. And I got to shake hands with everybody that came in, and I had to talk to them, and I got to know them. I knew I had to get a sponsor. And the only thing that I ever said in a prayer for those first few days was, help me find a sponsor. That's all I said. There was no thee, thous. There was no fancy prayer that I knew how to do. It was just, help me find a sponsor. One that's good for me. And I went back a couple weeks later, and Spencer was still there, and I just couldn't ask him. So I went through another week, help me find a sponsor, and it was just, I knew I had to ask him. And I asked him, and he's, Spencer being Spencer, he says, well, let me tell you what you got to do, and then you can decide whether, you want me to sponsor you. And it really wasn't that bad. He said, I want you to go to 3 meetings a week. You can go to 4, but I want you to go to 3 and go to the same 3. I want you to call me every day. Can't remember if he told me to read or not, but I think he did, and read the big book. And so I did, and I started calling Spencer. For some reason, my life started getting better. I worked the steps. I remember step 1. Step 1 for me was hard, because all the other times that I'd went to treatment, it was for drugs. I knew that I could drink like a gentleman. And my life was unmanageable by me. So step 1, I had to really figure out how powerless I was, and I went right back to when I went into my room and said, please help me want to be here. That's the first time in my life that I surrendered at all. I was a broken man. And I knew I had completed step 1 at that time. Step 2, the way I was raised, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. I've always known there was a God, and I've always known that Jesus was my Savior. but it didn't pertain to me. Because I'm not worth saving. And so then we go to step 3. Step 3 was made a decision to turn our lives and our will over to the care of God as we understood him. I remember thinking about all the times I got out of treatment and went to church. I had turned my life over to God. But I never once turned my will over to God. Because my will, out of all those treatment centers, every time I would get out, I could build my life back up, get myself out of the hole, get a great job, get a new home, get a new car. I could do it for a while. And something would always happen that I would go back to what I knew could fill this hole inside me. Now, step 3 was a little harder for me because I knew that I'd broke every commandment that I was taught as a kid. I knew I could hear my dad's voice saying, "Curtis, we don't want empty chairs in heaven. We don't want any empty chairs." Well, I knew that there was going to be an empty chair because I didn't serve a mission. I wasn't like my siblings. I didn't go to church. I was disfellowshipped. I knew that it was different for me. And I realized there was another part of step 3. A God of my own understanding. Nobody else but me. The guilt I had, the guilt that was killing me and eating me alive. I gave up a son at the age of 4 because I didn't want to pay child support. My second wife and I adopted a little African-American girl, and I divorced her mom. And so here this little girl is in Utah, black, without a dad and adopted, and I knew I was a worthless piece of crap. I couldn't deal with it. And then came step 4. Step 4, Spencer had told me to go home and write down every resentment I had about people, places, and things. Anything. And I did. And he invited me to his house. And we went through what happened. What did you do? I think it was, what did you do? What happened? And what part of it was your part? I believe I had 63 items on that list. That's why Spencer was dehydrated. And for some reason, step 4 and 5 is not put this. Step 4 and 5 is not it is the awful stuff, but it's more resentments and things that just make you so angry that you know you didn't have a part in it. For some reason, a 4th and 5th helps that go away. And I know in my 4th and 5th, we didn't talk about giving up my son. We didn't talk about divorcing my second wife. and leaving a little girl who'd been adopted alone. We just talked about other things that I just had some resentments towards. And we figured out everything in there that was my fault. For some reason, my guilt started to ease. And I started to think maybe step 2 and 3 might work for me. That maybe I'm not such a bad guy. Maybe I'm worth saving. And by this time, I'm going to meetings, I'm working my steps, I'm calling people. People are calling me. I'm calling my sponsor. And for some reason, my life got better. And when I say better, that hole inside me was starting to be filled. You know, I remember at the end of that 5th step, Spencer wrote down a few things. I'll share one with you. He wrote down, he told me that, Curtis, after all this time, I think you don't think the rules apply to you, that you're different. The rules do not apply to you. And he was correct. You know, I have went back to that statement in the last couple years. You know, I had got, I was supposed to be to work at 8. I'm an early riser. I get up early, and I started going to work at 7 because I wanted to. And this went by for a little while, and I got told that I can't come to work till 8. Well, my first thought was, do you know who you're talking to? I can come to work at 7 if I want. I'm not hurting anybody. I instantly went back to what Spencer had said. You think the rules don't apply to you. You know, step 6 and 7, I went through 6 and 7. I was entirely ready to have God remove my defects of character. I absolutely was. And I asked him, please remove from me my defects of character and make me a better person. I truly did that. And in the last 4 years of being sober, there have been times where every one of those defects of character have came back. Every one. And the reason that I found out was I started doing 10 and 11. You know, 8 and 9, making amends. I knew my kids have seen this thing that I go through their whole life. My wife has seen it. What can I possibly say to let them know that I'm sorry? I can't. There might become a time that I can sit them down and talk to them, but right now, they're just waiting for the other shoe to drop because they've seen this before. I had an opportunity. I had no intentions of paying this guy back. In my mind, he didn't need the money. He was a great guy. He would understand. He has a son in the program. He knows how we are. I had no intentions of paying him back. About a month and a half ago, I kept feeling this feeling that I needed to pay this guy back. It ate at me and ate at me. And I didn't share it with anybody. I didn't tell my sponsor because he's going to tell me to go pay the guy. I didn't share it. But my higher power kept nudging me and saying, this isn't for him. This is for you. I called him and I paid him. But the part of the story that was the hardest is I had to tell my wife. Because believe it or not, she just doesn't give me $1,000. And I had to tell her, and she did not know. Orland was pleasant. Jana was not so pleasant. And I deserved it. Because I took her back to the lying, cheat, and thief that I was. And she knew from the moment that I told her that I hadn't been truthful. And so everything has been a lie. But the beautiful part about that story is I just let Jana be Jana. I didn't try to fix her. I let her be mad. What I did is I came here and talked to other men about it. And it's over and done with. I think my opportunities for 8 and 9 are going to come when my higher power lets me know that it's time to make a wrong a right. I don't hide from anybody. I make sure my side of the street is clean through 10 and 11. And what's crazy is I don't make a big thing out of it. I just sit there at night and I just think, how was my day? What was the good? What was the bad? Do I need to make it better? Do I need an apology for anybody? I take an inventory of Curtis. And for some reason, my life is getting better. You know, I have fought this program my whole life. And I fought it every step of the way, and step 12 is no different. I voiced out loud in meetings to my sponsor that I'm not the sponsoring guy. It took me forever. I have nothing they want to hear. I'll let you guys that, you heavy hitters, be sponsors. It's not for me. And lo and behold, one Saturday morning, a gentleman asked me to sponsor him. And I didn't say no. I have men calling me from 7 a.m. till 6 o'clock at night. And I go through the steps with them, and we talk. They become my friends. You see, when I came here, I wasn't like you. I didn't want to be like you. I didn't want to get to know you. But through step 12 and walking another man through this program has changed my life. And for some reason, my life is getting better. And when I say getting better, that anxiety that I felt as a child, the nervousness, the not fitting in, I didn't fit in at a family gathering. My wife would plan barbecues with our kids and my grandkids, and I didn't fit in. Today I fit in. And I know it's not them, it's me. If you're new, this program works. Because I would get rid of the mental obsession, the physical allergy, but I never fixed the spiritual side of my life. And I always returned to the bottle. But for some reason, 4 years ago, I decided to do it somebody else's way, not mine. And I'm so grateful for that. I am grateful for the men in my life. I am grateful for my wife. She's the hero in this, man, not me. And I'm just so grateful that today, by taking a few simple actions and by listening to somebody who walked this path before me, that it's made my life better. And not every day is roses. Not every day is great, but it's okay. It's okay to have a bad day. But if you keep putting one foot in front of the other and doing what our higher power wants us to do, what some people tell us to do, for some reason the next day's better. And it's mind-boggling to not have that physical and mental obsession to drink or use, that I've replaced it with the same thing my dad replaced it with. A spiritual program of action and of service. That's why I'm here. I told Ron no the first time. You know what he did? The guy had the audacity to call Spencer. Ron and I have the same sponsor. This was more for me than you. And this is how we stay sober. This is how our life gets better. And I'm grateful you're here. And I'm grateful for AA. Thanks.